Hello, everyone, and welcome to the epilogue of Forgotten Relics. There were a few elements that I originally was going to put in Chapter 1, but soon after I realized these were moments that didn't require the players, so I decided to turn it into a short story. My thanks to Rex, Stella, and Steve, and Locke for lending their voices to some of the characters in this episode. On a cool and shadowy Sharn night, an exhausted Sergeant Vilroy exhaled as she sat back in her chair. A stack of recently finished papers sat on her desk in front of her.
What a night.
After today's events, things were brisk within Eberron. Rumors of the attacks within Terminus Station spread like wildfire, with dozens of supposed eyewitness reports finding their way into the Sharn Inquisitive. From a shootout at Cog Carnival to gnolls attacking a sky coach, finally ending with a supposed fight on a moving lightning rail. In each other, at the center of all these rumors, was a group of oddballs, or so-called adventurers. The Oddballs, just the word alone was enough to give her a headache. She knew cobbling together some old contacts for a top-secret assignment would have a drawback. She just couldn't put herself or the Sharn Watch in the middle of a war between Dosk and the Boromar clan, especially since she was on the latter's payroll. To their credit, the members of the Oddballs were each skilled in their own unique way, but Jell's surprise intrusion only worsened the fear. The young drow elf troublemaker had been a thorn in her side for the past several years, always causing havoc in some form in any district of Eberron. Granted, they were not as dangerous as Dask or the Tyrants, yet they always knew how to cause panic. Vilroy should have detained and returned Jell to their parents, but she knew the drow elf was a blabbermouth, and the sergeant couldn't risk the mission being made public. Adding to the pile was Jell's dragonborn parents showing up at Terminus searching for them. They had been searching for them since hearing of the Sky Coach incident. It took a lot of convincing, but Vilroy made an agreement with them to stay silent on the day's events, as long as Jell remained out of Vilroy's future affairs, something the sergeant was more than happy to agree with. Of course, that also depended on how long Jell's parents could keep their eye on them.
That elf is going to be the death of me,
Vilroy muttered as she lit a cigarette, taking a long drag.
They all are.
So much had happened to the sergeant in a day just after sending the Oddballs off. First, shortly after leaving, she was ambushed by a changeling, later identified as Jas, who brought her to the half-ogre Gara. For the next few hours, the Dask lieutenant and her cronies tortured Vilroy for information on the Oddballs' meddling. Finally ended when Gara had to swiftly depart with the Relics when word of the adventurers' arrival reached the half-orc. Granted, she achieved a little payback by delivering a brief but well-earned beatdown to a gnoll named Nur for his involvement. Very unbecoming of a Sharn Watch sergeant, but sometimes you have to blow off steam. Despite her gratitude for their arrival, along with Earl staying at the station to help explain things to the guard and earn their help, Vilroy was frustrated with the Oddballs' actions throughout the rest of Terminus, including the arrest of Gara. Would have been better had Gara been killed, as now the higher-ups were vying for the half-ogre's life. Among them was Elira Boromar, furious over the kidnapping of Corin, one of her agents, angry not only at Dask's cruelty, but also at the Oddballs, forcing Corin to, quote, swear an oath to abandon his life of crime or face the consequences. Vilroy managed to lightly placate the halfling by explaining just how dumb the adventurers were. To Vilroy's surprise, it worked for the most part, but Elira still intended to keep an eye on them. Next time she met the Oddballs, Vilroy would inform them that they owed her for that. And now here she was, filing paperwork and tying up any remaining loose ends. A long cloud of smoke slowly escaped her lips as her eyes wandered the room, lost in thought, until a rookie suddenly burst into her room. "Sergeant!" Vilroy held up a hand as she coughed, having accidentally gulped down some of the smoke in surprise.
What? What is it?
The rookie, a young-looking half-elf male, could only stand there for a few moments with a dumbfounded expression, as though he was struggling to find words. It's Gara! She's gone!
Fuck.
Things were relatively quiet at Unicorn Estate. Alden the Orion sat in his son's room, a storybook in his hands as he watched Caden peacefully sleep. Light from the hallway leaked through the open door, illuminating his son's face. The poor boy had been through so much during the week, but Alden was grateful the events did not seem to scar his son. He was relieved he wouldn't need to send a letter to Ayana in Fairhaven. While Alden was terrified for Caden's life, Ayana would have been inconsolable during the wait. Seeing his former life like that would have added so much more to the guilt and grief, not just for Caden's kidnapping, but for the lives of the Warforged lost. No doubt his former wife would be furious upon learning that as well. Yet in the end, despite how they may argue, Alden knew they'd both be conflicted. Any wish or demand he would grant, if within his power, to save their son, failing to acknowledge the cost that would come from it. A soft knock at the door drew the father's attention in brief ire as he looked over his shoulder to see Vishtai. The look in the Kalashtar's eyes told the scion of House Orion that the former was there on business that could not wait. Reluctant to leave his son, Alden exhaled sharply, and his fists clenched before he slowly rose, placing the book on a nightstand.
What is it? I'm not really in the mood for any business issues right now, Vishtai.
Vishtai nodded solemnly, adjusting his glasses to prevent them from falling. Believe me, Alden, I understand. Unfortunately, this is a matter that I can't delay. The Overseer has requested to see you. Alden felt his heart briefly skip a beat as his eyes widened. He quickly ushered Vishtai back before slowly closing the door to Caden's room. They swiftly moved down the hall to Alden's office, a million thoughts racing through the noble's mind. The Overseer himself is coming here to meet him? The former rarely approached any of the houses within the Hidden Trinity, at least never in public. Not unless he met with the leaders on his terms to either talk business or, as the Overseer put it, quote, fix a patch or schism building within the Trinity.
Please tell me he's not coming here directly, Vishtai. He didn't show any signs of trauma, yet I refuse to let a single Dask member within 100 feet of my son.
Then we should send them away, my lord, Vishtai hurled at the thought of Dask stepping foot on the estate. We should make it clear that we're not giving in to any more of their demands, after what they did to Caden. If anything, we should demand recompense or remuneration for their actions. They stopped at Alden's study, the noble grasping the door handle but pausing in thought.
You're right. But if we push too far, we'll lose more than a few broken bones or missing teeth. I need to tread carefully on this matter.
Alden turned the handle and pushed the door open, only for him and Vishtai to freeze. Inside the room, several candles provided a dim light as they sat on Alden's desk, while a silhouette sat in one of the other seats flanked by two imposing figures. Fingers stopped their rhythmic drumming upon the arm of the chair as their owner stood, as the other figures moved to the side. The light of the candles glinted off the Overseer's mask as he turned to face the scion of House Orion.
You are correct, my lord. It is a matter that we all need to tread carefully on.
Tension filled the study between the two parties as they sat in silence. Of that there was no doubt. Alden sat at his desk with Vishtai on his right. Directly across, the Overseer sat in his chair, his lieutenant standing still behind him, one a female blue Oni, the other a male Medusa. Alden could feel sweat collecting at the back of his neck, unsure how to break the silence. It was almost a relief when the Overseer's metallic voice cut through like butter.
I realize what an inconvenient time this is, Alden, especially with recent events. However, I realized how much easier things would be, settling the matter as soon as possible.
Alden found himself swallowing as he nodded.
Yes, I suppose you're right.
To start, allow me to apologize for the misunderstanding with your son. His kidnapping was an unforeseen factor orchestrated by Dask Lieutenant Gara, unbeknownst to her superiors.
Misunderstanding? Vishtai snarled, briefly startling Alden as the Kalashtar jabbed a finger at the Overseer. A child is taken from home, subjected to poor living conditions, possibly traumatized, and you call it a misunderstanding? Need I remind you that boy is also a scion of one of the houses within your trinity, which, last I recall, was supposed to be off-limits from Dask's activities. If the Overseer was insulted or startled by the outburst, he did not show it. However, the Oni clenched her fists and growled, moving forward as if to strike the Kalashtar, only to immediately back down when her boss gently held up a hand. Alden himself was surprised by Vishtai's tone. He knew the Kalashtar had a severe hatred for criminals, something Vishtai refused to explain.
You are correct. When I formed the Trinity, I promised that as long as business went smoothly on the surface, Dusk would not interfere or strike out against any of the houses. I have kept my word, but one detail I should point out is that not all within Dusk are aware of the Trinity's existence, Gara included. Only myself and my most trusted officers know, which is to prevent knowledge of the Trinity from reaching the public, in case any lower Dusk member cracked under pressure from the Sharn Watch or the Boromar clan.
Alden could understand that reasoning. When Baron Quanti D. Orion had sent out messages to all members of House Orion throughout Corvair, informing them about the formation of the Trinity, many were shocked, Alden included. Yet in the years that followed, he could not deny that the union of the Trinity gave the houses numerous benefits and helped their businesses prosper. If the public learned that Dosk was responsible for their good fortune, everything would fall apart or even escalate to war. Vishtai looked as though he wanted to retort, but a glare from his employer made him reconsider. Alden would settle this matter properly, if only so that he and his son could move on.
You make an excellent point, sir. I can understand how events like this are inevitable, and I would like to put it to rest. However, after everything my son went through, I would like to request some form of compensation.
Alden mentally braced himself, unsure if he made the right choice or just put himself in the line of fire. To his surprise, however, the overseer nodded.
I couldn't agree more, my lord. Fortunately for you, compensation for your troubles is another reason for our visit.
He snapped his fingers.
Kavala, Harash, bring the gift.
The two moved to a dark corner of the room, returning with a bulky figure a little taller than the Oni, wrapped in chains with a sack on their head. As they forced the newcomer to their knees, the overseer stood and removed the sack before turning to Alden.
Alden Dorian, I give you Gara, Lieutenant of Dusk.
The tone of the room changed as Alden and Vishtai stared at the gift in shock. Alden's surprise soon after morphed into an expression of fury, his gaze completely locked on the half-ogre in front of him. It took him several minutes to compose himself before speaking.
I must admit, this is the last thing I expected as a gift, especially from you. How did you get her out of prison?
Some things are better left to the imagination, my lord. My associates and I are a little pressed for time, so we must wrap this up. Gara, anything to say for yourself before we leave?
Gara snorted as she eyed the noble up and down.
If you're expecting me to beg for mercy, or acknowledge how I've seen the error of my ways, do not bother. I had a mission, I carried it out, and I won't apologize for my methods. If my death furthers Dosk's goals, then so be it.
Deep down, a part of Alden wanted to strike her, list off everything she put his son through and make her apologize. He knew doing so would make him no better than her and be very unbecoming of a noble from a dragon-marked house. He had to be better for his son. Exhaling softly, he turned to the overseer and nodded. Dusk's leader turned to Kavala.
My dear, if you would.
In one swift motion, the Oni wrapped an arm around Gara's neck and broke it. The half-ogre's body slumped to the floor with a resounding thud. Silence again lingered before the overseer broke it with a slightly exaggerated bow.
A pleasure doing business with you, Alden.